In this video, I'm going to be drawing this thing, or these things. In fact, we're just going to be doing a sketchbook session. I'm going to be drawing some heads, and I'm going to talk about how important I think just drawing fun things like heads are. Simple portraits, profiles. I think that's so important for your development to just kind of have fun. And also, as we'll talk about, they're a really important part of building a successful career. But before we do that, you got to check out this art book. This is the Breath of Fire 4 art book. It's one of my all-time favorites, in fact, because I think it's a mix of a number of really fun things. Firstly, awesome world building. Secondly, cool JRPG designs, I think from a very particular point in history, which is really good. And also simple line and color art. So we'll flip through this. Got to check it out. I think, again, it's one of my favorites. As usual for a Drawing Codex video, this is going to be neither fast-paced nor heavily edited. This is just a simple hangout and draw session. We're just going to chill, hang out, draw some cool stuff, and I'm going to talk about art books, JRPG art, how important I think sort of sketching is, and again, this is just going to be a simple, laid-back session. So hopefully that sounds interesting. Hopefully you'll join me. Let's jump in and get started. Alright, welcome to the Drawing Codex. My name is Mcburnie. I've been a professional working artist for over 20 years, and on this channel, we're all about drawing cool stuff from our imagination, embracing the challenge of drawing, and mastering the craft of line and color illustration. Now, if you'd like to learn more about line and color illustration, the same style that I create all my comics and illustrations in, you can check out my free quick start guide. It's aimed to get you up and running quickly in Photoshop, developing your own simple, reliable line and color process. It's free. The link will be in the description. Go check it out. This is probably one of my all-time favorite art books, actually. And I've lugged this thing around for ages. I probably bought it off Amazon Japan quite some time ago. It is the Breath of Fire 4 art book. And I really like this because, I mean, firstly, it's just full of really sort of great, colorful, sketchy illustrations, which I think is something that is always sort of enticing for artists. But I also think it kind of points to a really interesting area of JRPG design style. It kind of still has that feeling that I think came from a lot of the older Super Nintendo style designs where things are a little bit more simple, a little bit more colorful. But you know, a lot of that really early art for, you know, Nintendo games, the concept art, it wasn't quite as developed. They didn't quite have the budget, the time, all of that stuff. And this is just a really nice mix of, I guess, a point in time where we can kind of look at, and it has that real sort of JRPG, early RPG look. But yeah, they really did a good job on the concept art. And I'm a huge fan of the sort of artist who did the majority of the work here, which is Tatsuya Yoshikawa. And, you know, it's just one of those classic sort of Capcom artists who has done just a huge amount of that sort of old Capcom work. But yeah, I feel like when I was trying to learn art, one of the best ways to actually see really cool stuff, because the internet wasn't a huge thing, was in gaming magazines. And you would often see a lot of the promotional art, which was this kind of concept art, in magazines. They'd kind of preview it, and you'd actually learn about a lot of these RPGs that often didn't actually come to either English-speaking sort of countries, or a lot of them actually didn't come for me to Australia in PAL. So this was often what I would do, is I would buy gaming magazines just for the art, right? They'd have like a couple of little sections where they'd have some cool game that had some really good promotional art, or often concept art, and they'd sort of share that. And those early video game magazines were a really good repository of great art. Some of that art, you know, I'm like, I don't even know whether I've ever seen it after, right? It was just some little thing that was done as promotion. And yeah, so, you know, a lot of what got me interested in art was looking at this type of stuff. Designs for JRPGs, because they tended to have the best art and the most imaginative art. And I feel like, you know, the other reason I really like this art book is that it has just such a simple style, right? And I think Yoshikawa has that kind of classic line and color style that I like so much. And this is one of those books where, you know, I can go back to it and it just reminds me what is possible just through doing simple drawing. Just simple drawing, simple colors. You can create this entire world, and it's so easy to get sort of caught up in like doing more rendering or making things look fancy. And again, I always just come back to the roughness, but the obvious fact that there is this kind of amazing world created here. And again, this is just one of these real sort of artists' books where I feel like often, and this is the other thing, is that, you know, often these days they don't quite show as many of the sketches and as much of the rough stuff. As you get further back into this book, you see there's more of this development work. And this really gave me a good insight into, firstly, often like what the preparatory sketches look like, because you can kind of see here often some of these drawings are really rough, but, you know, they would be made into and they'd sort of turn out to be more finished illustrations. And it gave me real insight into how loose you can be as a professional, right? Because these are obviously functional drawings that were a big part of the creation, and they're really rough, but again, they do a great job of defining style, building visual library for the game, and, you know, just also this idea that I think they didn't clean these up that much, right? They do feel like they're still kind of loose, got all these little bits and pieces, and I feel it just gave me confidence to be like, oh, okay, these people are real, you know, it's not like everyone just has these kind of perfect little sketches, you know, like this, you know, often you have a nicer sketch that's, you know, mixed with some sort of other ones that feel like, you know, maybe they look to me, they're still good, but, you know, they're obviously a bit of a fail. And again, you know, I feel like we just clean up these art books so much these days. And it gives a real sort of weird vibe to people who are just sort of coming up, because they think everything has to be sort of finished. And it's important to understand that, you know, sketching is sketching, right? And often you have to kind of get into a really sort of good vibe with it, which is probably what we're going to try and do a bit of today. But yeah, definitely like super functional sketches, and, you know, as you sort of get a little bit towards the back, yeah, just get to see all these cool development sketches. And yeah, just like how much the artist sort of played with the character and had to sort of nail the character down. And yeah, I keep coming back to it, just like how, look, you know, the drawing is clean, but there's still sketchiness to it. It's just flat color, but you can really read the character design. And yeah, this book kind of just switched on a whole bunch of light bulbs for me early on. And I would kind of like, you know, see bits and pieces of this on the internet. You know, you could kind of see a few of these little designs here and there, but, you know, this is one of those ways where, yeah, you really sort of got to see it all kind of working. And yeah, there's just so many really cool designs. There's just a couple of these where I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to draw. And yeah, it always reminds me again, you know, how fun drawing those much more sort of simplified looks is. But yeah, you know, I feel like this to me just feels like prototypical classic JRPG design, right? It has that perfect mix that sort of came from the pixel art Super Nintendo days, where, yeah, you know, you sort of had probably Breath of Fire 3, I think would probably, again, I didn't play a lot of these because you couldn't. They weren't in English. But yeah, really cool. Prototypical JRPG kind of style, simple line and color style. One of my favorite artists ever. Just an awesome art book. I have no idea whether you can get it these days, but yeah, it's something I always look for on my bookshelf. But let's do some sketching. Now, I'm just going to do a casual sketching hangout session here. I'm going to draw some faces, and I'm also going to talk about how important I think it is to just sort of have fun when you're doing these sketching sessions. Again, somewhat like the Breath of Fire art book, right? Although I'm not going to be doing as much sort of design work, and just how important it is to kind of play around with faces, how useful faces can be, you know, for drawing all sorts of things. tools for today are going to be a Blackwing matte pencil. Got a couple of these sharpened. I have a kneadable putty eraser here if I need, and I also have a Tombow Mono non-dust eraser here, but yeah, probably won't be using that. The paper that I'm drawing on here, this is actually a sketchbook, and it is Strathmore 400 series sketch paper. So these sort of sketchbooks, it's like quite a chunky sort of sketchbook, right? You get like quite a few sort of pages there, and you know, normally I use this for just sort of messing around, right? I've been doing exactly kind of this sort of stuff that, you know, we'll probably be doing today, just sort of drawing, sketching, messing around. I was trying to design some little kind of lizard fantasy creatures there the other day, and you know, this is a lot of kind of what I do, right? Yeah, you know, just sort of character designs, little bits and pieces. I'm often just messing around, and you know, this is a legit sketchbook, right? There's not a lot of sort of ability to erase. This paper is sketch paper, so it's quite thin. Yeah, you know, you can't do a proper big illustration on it or anything like that. So we're just going to do some faces in this. So someone who is going through one of the courses that I run was kind of saying how, you know, they kind of had this idea in their head that drawing like profiles, for instance, is, you know, like just wasn't a good thing, you know, because it's sort of symmetry and you're not dealing with dimension. You know, there's no symmetry, you're not dealing with dimension, you're just kind of drawing these, you know, flat things. It's like doesn't have any worth, right? I'm just going to tilt this up so I can get the proportions right. And yeah, it was interesting to me to hear that. And it's so often that we have these like weird ideas that are in our mind about what is and isn't good, and, you know, what we should or shouldn't be doing. And yeah, you know, I was like, well, there's so many good examples of like artwork that basically just is a portrait, right? If you think about all the Alphonse Mucha kind of work, right? So often it's just ladies with profiles. And I actually think that, you know, drawing profiles, right, just the side view like this is super useful. It's one of the things, like, you know, just drawing faces. It sort of goes back to that idea as well that I think we often have, where we kind of think because, you know, like because something isn't super technical from an artistic standpoint, right? Because drawing just sort of faces, or just drawing profiles, just drawing simple portraits is not like the hardest thing to do, right? And it's often quite easy for a lot of people who are really into characters to do that early on. I feel like we often take for granted, and, you know, teachers are often trying to be like, oh no, push yourself, you know, don't just draw faces. But look, the reality is that, you know, if you're drawing comics, if you're designing characters, the faces are a really important part, right? To be able to get it right, to, you know, to be able to create an interesting face is, I think, one of the biggest challenges that artists face, especially when, you know, you're talking about like entertainment design, right? And even though some people are, you know, sort of good at it, right? You know, it doesn't mean it's not important. I mean, I would say, if you look at just sort of general human psychology and what tends to kind of work well as, you know, sort of social media posts, and what tends to draw the eye, it's all faces, right? We like faces. That's why TikTok works. It's just like, you know, it's just a little square with someone's face in it. It's kind of absurd to sort of imagine that like you can somehow get away from that, or that, yeah, because it's like not the most important sort of technical drawing thing to do, that, you know, the face is kind of useless, right? I mean, when I'm drawing comics, most of what you do is just sort of drawing people talking and being able to create interesting faces, being able to practice the emotions that they have, which is not necessarily what I'm doing here. I'm just messing around. But, you know, these are all things you build with muscle memory from sketching, right? Just being able to draw faces effectively and quickly. So yeah, it was interesting to kind of hear that. And I kind of said, no, I don't. I disagree. And especially when you're just sort of starting out. I mean, one of the things that I often talk about in the courses that I run is that you kind of need something really simple that you kind of enjoy so that you can go back to it. And, it doesn't, not some people like drawing cars, right? But, for me and for a lot of people, I think, we started drawing faces, just kind of messing around. And, it's sort of a major part of our sort of DNA as an artist. And I think if that is the case, I think it's really good to, continue to do that. Because if you're sort of practicing, it's good to have that thing to come back to, that thing that you can always rely on to be comfortable. And also when you're building your illustration skills, this is a big part of the sort of curriculum I have, is that you actually want to, when you're sort of pushing techniques or trying new things, you actually kind of want to keep everything else simple, right? From a scientific point of view, you want to control the variables. So if I try a new pencil, if I if I buy a new iPad, right? If I start from the sketching and I haven't sketched for a while, or if I'm trying to practice something like illustration, right? What I kind of say is like, okay, we can practice illustration by just sort of putting a frame around the things that we're drawing and thinking about composition. Where do we place the face? How do we, what expression does it have? If you can make a face interesting from an illustrative point of view, which is what quite frankly, a lot of really successful artists do, right? Again, people who are a little bit more in the sort of influencer space, as opposed to people who are actually kind of working and, having jobs and people sort of telling them what to do. They're just sort of drawing faces and that's kind of what people like. And it's just, sort of cute girls' faces. That seems to be a whole sort of career these days. So, and again, it's often just from the same sort of perspective that you sort of learn a couple of times and then, you kind of keep going. And, I think faces are often a foundation for sort of younger artists who are interested. And again, I'd be keen to know in the comments, right? Like, does that ring true for you or not? But for me, certainly it was, right? That's kind of where I started, and it's one of the biggest sort of challenges. It's one of the most important things to do, and profiles are good. So from a, design point of view, the profile is often, a major way that you have to draw the character in a comic book, or if your character doesn't look like your character from the side, then you're in big trouble. So yeah, definitely profiles are important to practice, and especially if these are if it does seem a little bit simpler to you, I think this can be a really good way to always have something to kind of start with, right? So instead of me kind of starting with some crazy angle on a face or something like that, just warm up, get used to what we're doing, and then you can either kind of leave it there, or we can if I wanted to try add more rendering, or if I wanted to practice adding color with some kind of color medium, again, just starting with a simple face that you already know how to draw is an excellent idea. All right, let's see if we can do a couple more here. See if I can do some that are less profile-y. And it also speaks to just how it's so easy for someone to kind of say some little thing for just it to kind of stick with you, right? Just be like, oh, don't do this, do this. This will kind of work. Let's see if we can draw something that's a little bit more dimensional. teeth, find center, boom. 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 But yeah, so often, you know, I will kind of focus on other things besides faces, right? And I think I've definitely done that to my sort of detriment, right? Not focusing enough on the things that I think really matter, right? During comics, you know, getting the character's face to look and feel right, I think is sort of so important. And yeah, if you can kind of do that, like basically nothing else matters too much. So much of what, you know, people enjoy about comics and animation and those things are the little facial expressions, right? It's how the character feels, how the character emotes, and it's not like, you know, that just sort of comes from nowhere. Because I think, you know, during character expression is a little bit different from sort of general drawing structure. And drawing structure can actually make getting your characters feeling right. It can actually make that sort of very, very kind of challenging. Because, you know, we tend to sort of stiffen up and be like, structure, right? You know, I've got to do some structure, got to make all the perspective right, all the rendering right. I've got to get all the anatomy right. And often expression is a matter of sort of pushing and expanding and adjusting that. It's one of the biggest challenges, actually. This is a complete aside, but one of the biggest challenges doing drawing demonstrations, because often I'll be like, here's how we sort of construct the face and make everything sort of super accurate, and then it always looks a bit dead, right? Because we focus on structure. Yeah, it's just one of the fundamental kind of challenges. Structure versus character. Really, really good artists are great at doing all of the above, right? Just constantly refining structure and ability to, you know, draw and make things look super solid, plus the ability to kind of make it feel as if, you know, things are alive, that there's emotion there. But yeah, so much of that is about like feeling the, you know, the very particular drawing that you're kind of drawing right now. See if I can move this around so we can get it a little bit more in the frame. So yeah, that's why, you know, just drawing faces is important, especially if you like doing it. You know, not everyone likes doing that. People like drawing cars and animals and dragons and all sorts of weird things. So, you know, if you're sitting there going, you know, I really like drawing faces, but, you know, maybe I shouldn't. Yeah, just understand this is one of the most important things that you can do. You know, as an artist, it's something that if you want to design characters and draw comics and, you know, create illustrations and things, it's going to make a huge difference if you can really practice that and get it looking good. Boom. Just doing a little bit of suggestion. Again, this is kind of going off the page, so I'm not sure exactly. Boom. How much of this I'll kind of finish. Get the teeth, and then also let's see if we can get the lip coming around here. Boom. And yeah, there's you know, there's a lot of sophisticated stuff that goes on when we're sort of talking about style and how you draw characters from different angles. There's a lot of stuff to shake out, and it's well worth, you know, playing around with that. You know, exactly how do you draw? How do you make the character feel like this from this angle? And you can kind of say like, well, it's all just kind of structure, right? But it's not all structure, because often, as I said, really good sort of character is about pushing and squashing and stretching. And even when you think you're kind of drawing realistically, again, a little bit of exaggeration will go a long way. I think often artists who get good at caricature and cartooniness actually elevate their realistic work as well by being able to, you know, just sort of push things a little bit. But it can be really tricky to know, you know, how to start and stop that. And, you know, if you're developing a style, you're really sort of pushing a particular character, and, you know, you have to kind of figure out, like, how do they emote? How do I make that feel sort of fun? And a lot of it is more sort of iconic, right? It's less a matter of just sort of drawing the structure. Often, you know, sort of pushing and exaggerating things. And then you have often the other issue of like, okay, well, you know, maybe I could sort of draw it all realistically, but, you know, you often don't have the space to do it. You know, you're drawing a very small character. You know, it's like, okay, how do I get the face to emote if it's really small? So there's a million things that you can, you know, work on when it comes to characters. And that's why I think, even though, you know, it feels like, I'm not sort of learning a lot, you know, if you're just sort of drawing more and more characters, I think doing that is actually super, super important. All right, let's try one more. New page. And I'll grab a new pencil as well, so it's a little bit sharper. Yeah, so I always sort of come back to doing these things, just kind of messing around, drawing heads. And, you know, the other thing is, if you're trying to develop a sketching habit or something like that, you know, often that first, you know, the first time you sit down, you really want to make sure you've got something that is, you know, sort of comfortable to work on, something that's comfortable, sort of cozy to draw. And as you kind of progress, then you can start to, you know, sort of push it a little bit more, draw some more interesting things. Let's see. Let's tilt this up. It's one of the good things about having a hardback sketchbook is you can kind of rest it. A little bit easier here for me to just make sure everything is kind of trued up. Which is not to say also that the other really important thing that just sort of drawing something comfortable like faces will give you is that just kind of warms up your hand, right? Drawing something you're sort of already comfortable with. Really good way to just key in everything, make sure everything is kind of working well. See if I can find that mound of the mouth. Boom. Yeah, I think that's working a little bit better. See if we can zoom up a little bit there. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so this is normally what I would do if I'm sort of warming up, if I'm not feeling like, you know, everything's all already keyed in for the day. Just play around. draw some very, very standard kind of things or characters that I've already sort of created. And you know, once I kind of start doing that, I often find like I get bored, right? At some point I become like, I've done this before. And you know, again, that's that creative feeling, right? The itch where you start to go, okay. Before I was kind of a little bit sort of worried that, you know, I wasn't going to be able to draw, and as soon as you kind of feel like, okay, no, I can draw again, it becomes a case of I want to do something new. And that's all you sort of got to do, is just wait for, right, you know, sort of wait for those feelings to hit. And yeah, you'll often find that then doing sort of original things or sort of pushing yourself is gonna happen naturally. So yeah, just starting with those portraits, profiles, simple things. See if we can add a little bit of sort of texture there. Boom. Let's go back there. See if we can build the torso out here. And yeah, this is where I'd start to, you know, play around, right? Let's draw some extra stuff. Find center. And yeah, the fun of just sort of having the sketchbook, and also, you know, in this case, like not really having good enough paper to erase is, yeah, like I really can't erase on this without making it look, you know, a lot worse. So, you know, I just don't. And that solves many, many, many problems. So yeah, let me know if you've had this feeling, right, of like, I should be doing this, or I should be doing that, especially when it comes to like feeling like we should be challenging ourselves. I think this is often a common thing, and I think it's just so important to kind of calibrate and know exactly where you are, right, on your sort of journey overall, but also like right now, you know, like today, where are you? Do you feel as if everything's going well? I think one of the often things that happens is that, you know, people kind of just don't do any kind of drawing, right? You know, because they feel like they should be doing something else, right? Like, I should be pushing myself. I should be doing more. Again, it's sort of easy to have those kind of like weird feelings, right? Let's see if we can make that a little bit better. And yeah, I think often what you'll kind of find is that if you start, a lot of things will kind of happen just fine. Oh. But yeah, the more specific you get, you know, the more you sort of try doing something a little bit different, or just kind of push some expression, the the more you're going to have to erase, play around with things. But that's part of it, right? Once I'm sort of warmed up, it's a lot easier to do all those kind of bits and pieces. Let's see if we can make these earrings a little bit more interesting. See if we can add something here. Right, that same thing. Refine some of this. See if we can find put that back down. Again, you can see when I'm sort of starting to get into the floor, just stop talking. See if we've got shoulder here. Right, shoulder. It's going to come up here. But yeah, I would always recommend just whatever it is for you, whatever that sort of full comfort zone is for you, that you just sort of really like drawing, just do it, right? Just play around with it. Haven't been going for that long, probably, sort of sketching for half an hour. This is normally the point at which I, sort of get bored of just sketching. And, start to want to do something else. I start to want to push myself, start to want to create more of an illustration, or, something that's more interesting here. Not exactly sure about what's happening with that. Breast anatomy. But again, boom. Cannot erase. Center. But yeah, I would just draw what you want in the beginning. And I think the good thing about one of these sort of sketchbooks is you can sort of keep it there. You can go back to it. If I do these on loose bits of paper, I do feel as if it's a little bit different, right? I often treat it a little bit differently. I often sort of throw it away. Whereas I think you can kind of make this into something that's a little bit of a situation where, you sort of go back to it. I can always sort of go back to these sort of designs. I can sort of think about stuff. I can sort of push it a little bit more sort of each day. And then the real thing about the sketchbook is you sort of go back and sort of look at it, and you can remember all the stuff you did. But yeah, pretty much done here. Let's see if we can plus some of these little bits and pieces. Boom. Add a bit of kind of shading and stuff. Just accentuate and punch in some of those extra bits of anatomy. Let's put a shadow under here, shadow under there. Right, shadow here. And yeah, don't need to finish off any of that sort of anatomy stuff. You can just leave it loose. Again, that's the fun of sketching. But yeah, that old Breath of Fire 4 art book to me really always just reminds me how much fun sketching is. I think maybe if I do another one of these soon, I'll try to draw some much more cartoony work, right? Because I think, again, that always sort of reminds me how much I like to do that. But yeah, anyway, so I think we're pretty much done here. Again, as I said, just messing around, hanging out, sort of sketching. Hopefully you've been able to do some sort of drawing too, or at least this has inspired you to do some today, which is you know, pretty much the whole sort of goal of doing this. Yeah, and you know, the other thing I think is, you know, with kind of sketching is you kind of have to know, like with this type of just drawing faces, messing around, you got to kind of know like where to leave it, right? There's always going to be a limitation to how sort of polished you can make things, especially with sort of sketch paper. You know, I can't erase, you know, infinity, but you know, that's the fun, right? It's sort of over, it's done. Just drawing faces, just playing around, just having fun. Let's see if we can do a little bit more on this mouth. See if we can push this expression a bit more. I think that's often where the drawing is lost or won, as it were. Just those little kind of subtleties and just pulling that focus, right? Boom. Yeah. All right, that's all we've got time for on this one. Let me know if you liked this format. I've been thinking about trying to get back to the roots of the art ritual videos that I actually did way back in the beginning, where we did a bit of a show and tell and then just kind of like a quick hang out, sketch out kind of session. These are kind of turned into more like 4-hour kind of videos where I show you, you know, the entire process to create an illustration. But again, I like that idea, so let me know if that sort of works for you, and I'll do some more. Other than that, catch you around. Happy drawing.